Good day, everyone. We are the first group and we will discuss the historical antecedents in which social considerations changed the course of science, technology, and society. After this report, you should be able to explain how science and technology affected the society and environment and vice versa. Second, identify inventions and discoveries that changed the world over the course of history. And lastly, discuss the scientific and technological developments in the Philippines. We are going to talk about how science and technology affect the people, culture, and society, and how it responds to the need of society in the past and in the contemporary time. Science. It is a concerted human effort to understand better the history of the natural world and how it works. It is done through observation of natural phenomena or through experimentation that tries to simulate natural processes under controlled conditions. So it is a study of nature and behavior of natural things, and it is basically a body of knowledge which is gained through observation. Technology. It is a scientific knowledge that is put into practical use to solve problems or invent useful tools. It is very useful in our environment in order to create tools, machines, products, and services that meet the desire in our society. Society. It is a group of individuals that are involved in a social exchange and interaction. It is those people who live in a community and have traditions, cultures, and institutions. So, how is science used in technology? It is the pursuit of knowledge about the natural world through observation and experiments. So, with the use of it, we can be able to develop a lot of technologies and innovations that meet the wants and desires in our society. So, what is the role of science and technology? It alters the way people live, connect, communicate, and transact. It is also a key driver to development and engine of growth. So, what does the science, technology, and society mean? Science, technology, and society is the study of how society, politics, and culture affect scientific research and technological innovation. And how does science and technology affect the society? Science and technology have a major impact on society and its impact is growing. It influences the society through its knowledge and worldview. And the science and society is neither entirely beneficial. And what is the relationship between science and technology? The impact of science and technology in society is evident, but society also influences science by creating knowledge and improving education. In this report, there are 4 parts to be discussed: the ancient times, the medieval or Middle Ages, modern times, and lastly, the Philippine inventions. Let's first tackle the ancient time. During the ancient times, the most encountered problems were the following: transportation and navigation, communication, security and protection, health, architecture and engineering, mass production, aesthetic, and record keeping. Transportation. During ancient times, there were problems in terms of transportation and navigation. In the past, transportation was significantly important because people need a mode of transportation for them to be able to travel to other places to search foods and to find new places for their safety. In terms of navigation, it was very difficult to navigate areas because there's no ways yet in the past to direct them point to point. Maps were still not highly accurate and some roads were still unavailable. Next problem encountered was the communication. There was no cell phone, satellite, internet yet in the past. There is no common language, but today we have a universal language which is English. In the past, it was very difficult for them to communicate. They were using signals like light reflection, fire, and smoke for them to be able to make a signal to their home base, especially if there will be an upcoming danger or invaders. Also, they used pigeons as a carrier of information as mode of communication for them to be able to deliver message in a faster and easiest way.
Next problem encountered was the record keeping. To keep records was very difficult during ancient times. They were using mud clay for them to engrave records. There was also difficulty to transport each record because of its heaviness and fragile. The next is mass production. The increase in size and number of nations cannot increase demand for food and other basic necessities. It is very difficult in the past to produce plenty of foods and basic necessities since they don't have the technology that we have been using today in the factory. Safety and protection. Due to difficulty in mass production, there was also difficulty in producing weapons and armors for the safety of each nation or tribe in the world. As there will be invaders, it was very difficult for a small country or area to secure their tribes or nation. Stronger nations tended to invade weaker ones so they could take much needed resources. If a nation has developed weapons and armors, it was considered a major achievement. Health. To conserve life was a major problem encountered during ancient times. Different illnesses and diseases cannot diagnose or treat well because in the past microscope to detect bacteria and viruses was not invented yet. Pharmaceutical drugs were not yet discovered. Appropriated health care practice was still on the process, so science and technology played a major role in the discovery of cures and prevention of illnesses. Next is architecture. Architectural designs in the past were considered a major technological advancement. Most of the nations during ancient times has their own architectural designs for the reason that it establishes their nation's identity. But the problem was there's no architectural designs that can be made in relations to highly scientific engineering. Engineering difficulty in constructing a bigger and stronger infrastructure was observed during ancient times. There was no available technology to measure and calculate things and building infrastructure, and most of the people became slaves and died for them to construct an infrastructure such an Egyptian pyramid. Aesthetics. People were not contented in beautifying only the infrastructure and surroundings. They made it more complicated by putting some decoration on your body to make presentable and appealing, and this thing is called aesthetic. Let's now proceed to the major technological contributions made by Sumerians, Babylonians, and Egyptians. Sumerians, they were known as a very cooperative in the development of things in relation with science and technology. These are the major contributions of the Sumerians. First was the cuneiform, first writing system. They used wedge instrument to carve words, pictures, and triangular symbols on a clay. This was used in order for them to communicate and for the purpose of record keeping. Next contributions is Uruk city, first true city in the world. They built it using mud or clay for them to be protected from the harsh weather, wild animals, and invaders. This was made to address the problem in safety and protection. Next contribution, the Great Ziggurat of Ur, also called the Mountain of God, was built in the same way that they constructed the city of Uruk. Next is irrigation and dikes. They invented irrigation and dikes to increase mass productions of foods. They created this to bring water to farmlands and at the same time to control the flooding of the rivers. Sailboats. The first mode of transportation was not rail but sailboat. They made this because people in the past could not cross the river and sea. This was invented to solve problems in sea transportation. Next contribution is wheel. The first wheels were not made for transportation but for farm work and food process. With the use of the wheel and axle, mass production was made easier. Farmers were able to mill grains with less effort in less time to solve the problem in mass production in terms of food supply. Lastly, roads. Roads were invented to address the problem in terms of transportation and navigation. In order to facilitate faster and easier travel, the Sumerians developed the first roads using sand-baked bricks.
We're now done with the Sumerian contributions. Let's now proceed to the Babylonian contribution. Babylonians. They were known as a great builder, engineer, and architect. This is the major contribution of the Babylonian, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. One of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, it was made of layers of plants, trees, and vines. However, its exact location is unknown because some said it was just a product of imagination, and some said it was destroyed by war, erosion, or earthquake. It was considered as the greatest engineering and architectural achievement of the ancient time. Let us now proceed to the Egyptian contributions. Egyptians. They were known in their infrastructures and engineering technology. These are the major contribution of the Egyptians. First was the papyrus. Egyptian was not the first one to develop the first writing system, but they made writing easier by developing a paper made from papyrus. Papyrus is a plant found in Egypt. This invention was a major accomplishment in Egyptian record keeping and communications. Second was the hieroglyphic. Egyptians also invented a system of writing called hieroglyphic, which uses symbols. It is usually seen in Egyptian pyramids. They believed that this writing system was provided to them by their gods. Third was the wig. Egyptian wig was developed not for aesthetic purposes but for the health reasons. They wear it to protect their skull from the harmful rays of the sun because wealthy Egyptians shaved their heads. Lastly, water clock or clysidra. This device utilizes gravity that affects the flow of water from open vessel to the other. The amount of water remaining in the device determines how much time has elapsed since it is full. We are now done with the Egyptian contributions. Let's now proceed to the Greek contributions. First was the alarm clock. The purpose of this alarm clock was to tell an individual when to start and when to stop. They made use of water or sometimes small stones or sand that dropped into drums which sounded the alarm clock to signal the start of lecture. Second was the water mill. This water mill addressed the problem in mass production. This was commonly used in agricultural process like milling of grains, which was a form of food processing, like rice, cereals, and flours. The difference between the wheel of Sumerian and Greek is that the wheel of Sumerian is manually operated, while the water mill of the Greek requires access to the rivers of the flowing water. We are now done with the Greek contributions. Let's now proceed to the Roman contributions. First was the newspaper. The first newspaper developed by the Roman were known as gazettes. These gazettes were engraved in metal or stone tables, which publicly displayed. When Egyptian was able to invent paper from papyrus, it was not easy for the Roman to publish news for the attention of the Roman citizens. Second was the bound books, or codex. The earlier covers were made of wax, but were later on replaced by animal skin, which proved to be stronger and long-lasting. With the papyrus pages bounded together and covered by animal skin, the ancient Roman Empire was able to produce the first books or codex. Lastly, Roman architecture. This structure made by the Romans still amazed the people today because of its architectural design that proved to be stronger and majestic that can be withstood with the hard elements of the environment.
And let's now proceed to the Chinese civilization. So we have 4 examples of Chinese contributions. The first one was the silk. One of the things that connects China to the world is silk. Chinese were the ones who developed the technology to harvest the silk and process it to produce paper and clothing. The second was the tea production. Chinese believes that this tea is good for health. China became known for its tea production exports aside from its silk products. The third was the Great Wall of China, the only man-made infrastructure that can be seen from the outer space. This was constructed for safety and protection, especially to keep out foreign invaders from entering China. These walls were made of stones, bricks, woods, and other materials. Lastly, gunpowder. The gunpowder is one of the most interesting inventions in China. This was accidentally made from mixing charcoal, sulfur, and potassium nitrate. Instead of creating an elixir of life, they accidentally invented a black powder that could actually generate large amounts of heat and gas. Let's now proceed to the most innovative contributions made in the medieval period. First was the printing press. It was invented to address the need for publishing books. The printing press utilized wooden machines that extracted juice from fruits, attached to them a metal impression of the letter, and pressed firmly the cast metal into a piece of paper, which then made an exact impression on papers. The second one was the microscope. This addressed the problems in terms of health. The invention of the microscope was the key in the discovery of new means in preventing and curing illnesses such as bacteria. Third was the telescope. This invention was one of the key factors to address problems in navigation. Lastly, war weapons. This addresses the concern in safety and protection. Soldiers wore an iron body armor. However, body armors were heavy and limits the movement of the soldiers. But this was solved by the invention of the chainmail armor. And let's now proceed to the most innovative contributions made in modern period. First is the pasteurization, a process of heating dairy products to kill harmful bacteria that causes certain diseases. This process allows milk to be stored and consumed for a longer period of time. Next is petroleum refinery. Refinery was able to be invented through refining of kerosene phyton. It changes crude oil into petroleum products for uses as fuel, heating, and generating electricity, which is widely used today. Next in the line is telephone. The discovery of telephone addressed a problem in terms of communication, especially the important day-to-day transaction that must be discussed and addressed at the fastest time during emergency. Lastly, the calculator. The creation of modern calculator did not only pave the way for easier arithmetic calculations, but also resulted in the development of more complex processing machines like computer.
Let's now move on to the historical timeline of science and technology in the Philippines. In the pre-Spanish era, the Philippines had few written information with regards to its society, culture, and technology. They settled in different areas across the country and made simple tools and weapons of stone flakes, and later developed new skills like sewing and polishing stones. Early Filipinos have also generated themselves into weaving, shipbuilding, mining, and farming that led them in creating the finest products of engineering, which is the Banawe rice terraces. When Spaniards colonized the Philippines, it contributed to the growth of science and technology in the country. They introduced formal education and founded scientific education. Parish schools were established where they taught religion, writing, arithmetic, and music. Natives were taught a more advanced methods in agriculture. Later on, they have established colleges and universities around the country, including the oldest university in Asia, which is the University of Santo Tomas. During the American period, science was inclined towards agriculture, food processing,
forestry, and medicine. Not much focus was given to the development of industrial technology due to free trade policy with the US that nurtured economy towards agriculture and trading. In 1950, there were reports made from the US Economic Survey about the Philippines' problem with regards to science and technology, such as lack of basic information, no support, minimal budget, and low compensation. In the Marcos era, he recognized that technology was the top reason in economic development and gave extra funds to support projects in applied science and education. He allotted large amounts of war damage funds to private universities to encourage them to courses that focus on science, technology, and research. During his era, one of his greatest contributions is the establishment of Pag-asa, which function is to give environmental protection and to utilize scientific knowledge to ensure the safety of the nation. In 1986, during Corazon Aquino's presidency, she replaced the National Science and Technology Authority into the Department of Science and Technology and gave the science and technology a seat in the government cabinet. During her SONA in the year 1990, Aquino said that science and technology development shall be one of the top three priorities of the government towards an economic recovery.
Let's now proceed to the most innovative contributions made in the Philippines. Salamander amphibious tricycle, invented by Victor Liave, teamed up with H2O Technologies to develop this tricycle. This invention can cross not only flooded streets, but also rivers and lakes. It can seat 6 people in land and 4 people in water. This invention was made to address the problem in transportation during flood. Next invention is the salt lamp. Isam Hino was able to invent a lighting system that utilizes material abundant in the Philippines. She invented sustainable alternative lighting lamp, an environmental friendly light source that runs and emits no toxic gas. This is specifically made for Filipinos in rural areas with no power supply and those who use candles and fire lamps that causes risk of fire. Third is the medical incubator. It was made by Dr. Fedel Mundo, who is a Filipino pediatrician and the first Asian woman admitted to Harvard Medical School. She invented it in 1941 in a bid to help families in rural communities. It turns out that it was made from cheap materials. By placing a native laundry basket inside a bigger one, 2 water bottles were inserted between the baskets to provide warmth and makeshift hood to allow oxygen circulation. Her invention has saved countless premature babies around the world. Fourth is erythromycin. It was discovered by Abelardo Aguila. Erythromycin is used to treat and prevent a wide variety of bacterial infections. It stops the growth of the bacteria, but it will not work for viral infections like flu or common colds. Lastly, we have the electronic jeepney or e-jeepney. Diesel-powered jeepney produces large quantities of black smoke and noise. To counter these disadvantages, the electric jeepney was developed. This modern type of jeepney utilizes an electricity instead of more expensive diesel. This modern jeepney is eco-friendly that emits no smoke or noise. Paradigm shifts in history. A typical example or pattern of something distinct set of concepts or thought patterns, including theories, research methods, postulates, and standards for what constitutes legitimate contributions to a field. What is paradigm shift? Concept identified by the American physicist and philosopher Thomas Kuhn, a fundamental change in the basic concepts and experimental practices of a scientific discipline. Kuhn presented his notion of a paradigm shift in his influential book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, which was published in 1962. Why are paradigm shifts important? Paradigm shift is another expression for more significant changes within belief systems. Within philosophy of science, this concept is sometimes considered important and is sometimes given great attention within education.
So Thomas Kuhn is an American philosopher of science in 21st century, and he wrote the most influential work of history, which is The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, and published it in 1962. On his book, he said that science does not evolve towards truth, but undergo periodic revolutions, or which can be meant as paradigm shift. Next is the Kuhn cycle. It is a simple cycle of progress described by this philosopher in his seminal work. In this structure, Kuhn challenged the world's current conception of science, which was it was a steady progression of accumulation of new ideas. There are 6 phases in the Kuhn cycle. The first phase is the pre-science, or also called the pre-paradigm stage. In this phase, there is not yet a model of understanding that mature enough to solve the field's problems, and the field has no workable paradigm to successfully guide its work. The second phase is normal science. It is identified and elaborated by Thomas Kuhn in The Structure of Scientific Revolution. It is the regular work of the scientists theorizing, observing, and experimenting within a settled paradigm or explanatory framework, and it is also where the field has a scientific-based model of understanding that work. The third one is the model drift. In this phase, the model of understanding starts to drift. Due to accumulation of anomalies and phenomenon, the model cannot be explained. The fourth is the model crisis. This one is the most important phase in all the Kuhn cycle, because the model drift becomes so excessive and the model is broken. It can be no longer serve as a reliable guide to problem solving. It attempts to patch the model up to make it work fail. The field is anguish. The fifth phase is the model revolution. It begins when a serious candidates for a new model emerge. It's a revolution where the new model is so radically different from the old one. A field's model of understanding is undergoing revolutionary change. The old model failed, which caused the model crisis step. The model revolution begins when one or more competing new models emerge from the crisis. And the last phase is paradigm change, or it is also called a paradigm shift. Early steps have created the new model of understanding, which is the new paradigm. In the paradigm change, the new paradigm is taught to newcomers to the field, as well as to those already in it. When the new paradigm becomes the generally accepted guide to one's work, the step is complete. The field is now back to the normal science step, and a Kuhn cycle is complete. Historical examples of paradigms: the society and ethics, slavery as acceptable to now slavery being unacceptable. In natural sciences, Darwin's theory of evolution, plate tectonics that create a physical model of Earth's structure. In human sciences, psychology, Sigmund Freud, we are not fully in control of our behavior. A subconscious part operates. In the arts, the realist paradigm, but the purpose of art is to copy reality.